Welcome to the OMS Podcast, your ultimate source of information and insights on the medical field. My name is Ronil.
And my name is Victoria, and we are excited to be your co-hosts today.
This podcast is designed for students who want to stay up to date on navigating opportunities in STEM and healthcare, with real advice from post-secondary students and professionals in the field.
Today, we will be talking about getting started with research as a university student. Joining us today are our guests, Victoria, Sarah, and Megan, who will be sharing their research experiences with us.
So tune in, join the conversation, and elevate your knowledge with the OMS Podcast. And we'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So starting off with Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I just finished my second year at the University of Calgary for cellular, molecular, and microbial biology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vitoria. I'm a third-year student at McMaster University in the Health Sciences program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan. I'm a first year at UCLA majoring in neuroscience.
Now, without further ado, let's get started with a few questions. So firstly, we know that research is a massive part of post-secondary education. Can you describe some of the research you have done and what your overall experience was like? We can start off with Sarah.
Yeah, so last year I was fortunate enough to become a part of the Arnie Charbonneau Cancer Institute at the University of Calgary on the Foothills campus. I was doing brain cancer research, specifically with the brain cancer glioblastoma, and I was working at the Cairncross lab. I think the experience was so amazing. I got to do a lot of wet lab work, such as cell culturing, Western blots, and even a mouse brain dissection. And then I also got to do a lot of dry lab research where I was just researching stuff for projects that are upcoming or helping the master's and PhD students in the lab figure out what they're doing with their projects, how to help them find sort of backup information for what they're doing. But the whole thing was amazing. I worked for 4 months last summer and I'm going back next week, and it's going to be great. Like, it's just so amazing to get to actually apply what you've learned in school and in your classes to like real life research and stuff that could actually change the healthcare world rather than just doing stuff that's been tested before. So it's definitely something that I recommend to anyone who's interested in med school or health sciences in general. It's something that definitely changes your life.
Wow, yeah, that was very insightful and really cool to hear about your experiences. Victoria, you next.
Yeah, so I've been working at a food allergy lab for the past year and a half, and I really enjoy doing research because I get to be around a lot of people who are very passionate about subjects that I'm interested in as well. So we study peanut allergy, developing therapies and investigating how allergies start. And so I've learned a lot about how to conduct science, how to plan experiments, many techniques like microscopy, preparing tissues and things like that. So I definitely think having the hands-on experience and experiencing challenges and having to overcome these challenges has been very important in my decision to continue in science, as well as having like knowledge about all the applications that this research can have in medicine. So I definitely think that this experience has been very rewarding for me.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing to hear. And finally, Megan.
Yeah, so from January to March, I took a course at school that was focused on biomedical research, which I found really insightful and really interesting. So our class had us dissect these fly larvae to examine their lymph glands, which is something that produces their blood cells, and exploring how their signaling could help improve immunity for cancer patients. And now I just onboarded into a clinical lab where we're looking at the effects of cannabis on different aspects of human behavior. And I think that's really interesting as, hopefully future med student, because that's when you really see how stuff that you design in the lab can really be applied to human patients as well.
Wow, yeah, that's definitely very interesting. Victoria, I'll pass it off for you for the next question.
Yeah, so we have all heard of research before, but I'm sure there are many types of research out there, even in just one field of study. So could you, Sarah, give a few examples and explain some of the common types of research in the medical field?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely two main types of research. There's kind of like the large scale research where you're looking at a big project over many years, trying to figure out something that's pretty difficult to really get a foothold on. And there's the other kind, which is I think clinical case studies. I'm not sure about the details of that because I'm not in a lab like that, where they kind of just look at one sort of case or one situation over just a short period of time, and they just focus on that one patient and their issue, and then they'll publish something by the end of the summer, or under with a lot less time. But the lab that I'm working with right now has sort of been like up for many years. They've been studying the origins of glioblastoma and different risk factors that could cause people to get glioblastoma and different therapeutic approaches to fighting this type of cancer. So I think that those are definitely the two main types, and there's definitely pros to both of them. One thing I definitely like about the type of research I do is that there's so much longevity in the stuff you're doing, and when you go back and look back at the papers that have been written from this lab so many years ago and see how much everyone's progressed and how you can sort of help something that's been so long standing, it really makes you feel like you're part of something bigger and really makes your work feel very important. And it also gives you the chance to continue with this lab for a long time because you know that what they're doing isn't something that gets over really quickly. It's really, you've got to be dedicated to it, and you've got to be able to commit a lot of time to it. But for someone like me who really does love going back to something every year and continuing it like it's a story, this type of lab work really works well for me, just because even though I'm not in a hurry to get a paper out, because I know that's not going to happen with this kind of a lab, I like the fact that I could keep going back, keep working on this, and who knows, eventually when we do reach that breakthrough that we're looking for, it'll be a really big reward.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. So long-term research definitely sounds like a very rewarding type of research to be doing. So let's move on to Vitoria. How about you?
So I've experienced, like, I've watched conferences and talked to people in many different fields of research. So we study food allergy, but there are many other labs that, for example, do bioengineering, transplantation medicine, or oncology. There are just many different fields of research that are required for medicine. And I think the beauty of it is the diversity of all the different streams of research and science that you could be doing to improve medicine. I think that there's a lot of overlap between research and medicine more and more as things progress. Having doctors investigate specific therapies to help individual patients is something that's becoming very common. I actually recently attended a conference about biomaterial engineering, and one doctor talked about a case study where he was treating a burn patient, and he was able to use all his knowledge in the lab to bridge different fields to develop the best therapies. So bridging the field of engineering and biology, as well as like bioengineering, to build kind of synthetic solutions to help this patient. So I think there are definitely many different types of research, and like they're all very valuable for the medical field. So
Thank you so much for giving these different examples of like all the different fields that you've encountered. So now I'm going to pass it back to Ronald for his question.
Yeah, so I know a really big thing is that there's always a lot of regrets that people might have in the future. So if you were to be able to go back in time and give one piece of advice to your younger self when beginning research, what would that advice be? Let's start with Megan this time.
I would just say not be too stressed about finding research positions in general. So this is probably something that we're going to be talking about later, but I think once you actually start a lab position, sometimes it does take a lot of time to do onboarding, and it's also going to take a long time sometimes to find a lab that really, fits with your interests. And so I would say that students who want to, do research because they like it, or, because they also need it for, medical school apps, I think you should prioritize your passions and your interests for doing research rather than just trying to hop onto the first position that you can get, because it's really important that your priorities and the lab's goals are aligned with each other.
Yeah, that really makes sense. And making sure that your goals are aligned must be super important. Let's go to Sarah next.
Yeah, so for me, something that I tried to do, but I think I still wish I did more of it, was chronicling everything that I did over the summer and really writing it all down, even if it seemed regular in that day, still like putting it down, making sort of like a little, almost like a handbook for myself for when I go back this year, because there's so much stuff that I did that seemed so regular every single day, such as, culturing my cells or, running another Western blot. And though I did write down the results and have, general little notes about what was happening, I really wish I'd gone through and written it as if I would be giving to someone who'd never done it before. Because now when I'm going back, I'm kind of like, wow, it's such a long time ago. To get back into the swing of it might take me a bit more time. And also just to remember my time more in detail, like to have a book of stuff that I did like in crazy detail would be nice. And definitely going back now, if I could do it again, I would write down even the smallest details, like quantities of stuff that I used and things that worked for me specifically when I was doing this specific procedure versus what others told me to do. Because I think as you work in a lab, you realize that everyone has a different way of doing things, like using pipettes or running the Western blots and positions that help you succeed and make those tests actually work so you're not wasting time or money. So definitely keeping track of all that little stuff that I might have forgotten over the year would have been really nice to have.
Yeah, jotting down those little things, making notes of that sounds very important and would be a really good idea. And Victoria, do you have anything that you would tell your past self?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Sarah saying about journaling. That's something I also wish I did. But one thing I would say to my younger self is to be less afraid of talking to other people. So I think talking to professors or even people who are also doing research in my university, I don't know, I would always feel really anxious about going out and reaching out to people. But once I got older, I started making these connections more, especially, I guess, in the past few months. But I think doing that earlier would have helped me get ahead, asking for help, asking for better protocols or different ways to do things. I think people are there just to help you. So reaching out and communicating with others sounds scary, but the earlier you start, the easier things will be, I would say.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very true. And I'll pass this back to Victoria for the next question.
Yeah, so thank you all for sharing some personal examples on your research journey. So we see many high school students who are starting out their research for the first time, maybe. And so what are some common pitfalls that you may have fallen into, or you have noticed other students tend to fall into when researching or starting out a research project? So I guess we could start with Megan, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing that I notice is that, I think a lot of people think about research as just being this one-dimensional, like you're in a lab wearing a lab coat and you might be pipetting some chemicals into test tubes and things like that. That's a very conventional idea of what lab work is. But I think that there's so many different ways of doing research. It can be in like STEM with like wet lab and dry lab. And then there's also research in the social sciences and humanities as well. So it's really not a one size fits all kind of scenario. And I think that when students are looking for research opportunities, it's important to note the differences in these types of research and see, what fits their interests best.
Yeah, thank you. So I totally agree with that. I think it's very important for different students with different interests to look into different programs. Let's go on to Sarah.
Yeah, so something that I've noticed over the last summer, or even during the school year, is that a lot of students can get very like one-track mind. They're very stressed out about research. For them, they feel like they have these achievements that they want to reach during a short period of time, that they feel they need to get into med school or grad school or whatever they want this research to be for them. So they care a lot more about what research is giving them more than what they could give to the research. And I think it's very important to take a step back sometimes and realize the bigger picture of what you're doing, the fact that you're actually helping out the healthcare world and helping out patients and situations that are unsolvable and getting the opportunity to actually help out and things like this rather than just thinking about getting that paper done or getting that award the presentation or succeeding for yourself. I guess I think it's way more important to sort of think about this as a real job, as something that you're actually doing for the world rather than just something that's going to help you get somewhere. I think that's something that I always see people get into, and they're so stressed out, and sometimes they don't even take time to have proper lunches or meet people and really network and stuff like that. And they're so focused on just achieving that one thing you want to achieve in the summer or that year or whatever. But I think it should be taken with, like just experience it, have fun with it. Of course, it is good to be serious about it and focus on your work and do what you want to do and achieve what you want to achieve. But at the same time, it's really important to be looking at the bigger picture, taking the time to like appreciate it, have fun, make friends within the lab or in other labs or, different people in your floor. Yeah, I think you should understand that this experience is something that not many people get. And once you grow up, if you don't end up going into a master's or PhD degree, and if you do something like, say, you become a doctor where you're not really having that lab side of things, you might really miss this work you're doing now. So I think really appreciating what you're doing and having fun with it rather than just being really stressed out for another 4 months apart from the school year is a really good thing.
Yeah, so I think contributing and being part of a larger research program is very important already in and of itself, for sure. Finally, let's go on to Vitoria.
Yeah, so I actually want to add on to what Sarah and Megan were saying. I definitely agree with all the points that were made. I think the biggest pitfall is students thinking they have to do research and getting into a research program or working on some kind of project that they absolutely hate. And then they end up doing okay work, just following obligations, just completing tasks, and kind of waiting for the research experience to be over. And after a few months, like maybe they're doing their thesis, maybe they're doing a project course. Eventually it ends, obviously, but like what did you learn from that experience aside from just doing a few tasks, right? I think the biggest pitfall is doing something that you're not interested in and then being chained down to this position that you don't enjoy and kind of souring research as a whole. So I would definitely say get involved in a topic that you're actually interested in, because yes, it's really hard finding, I guess it's not really hard, but it might be challenging to find a good research position. But once you find a position that you're actually interested in a topic that you love, that's when research starts becoming really fun, and doing hard work for that research becomes really easy when you actually enjoy and you're passionate about what you're doing.
Okay, I thank everyone for their answer. And yeah, definitely, I think that at the core of this is that like it's most important to choose a research project that you're truly passionate about. And having said that, I'll hand it back to Ronald.
Yeah. So I know that whenever you start something new, like going to a new school or doing a new job, it's always intimidating. So starting off a new research position can also be very intimidating. Are you able to describe a few things that people should know before beginning their research? And is there any preparation that should be done in advance? I'll start this off with Victoria.
Yeah, I feel like starting research, like I would definitely say taking courses that you're interested in. So for example, I took an immunology course before starting my research position, and I feel like that really helped me intellectually to be involved in the project. So I would say there's no extra preparation that you have to necessarily do, like maybe reading articles, maybe being involved in some journal clubs. I think that is definitely important. But something I would definitely do is doing courses, or I guess maybe just engaging in activities that are related to the field. For example, taking the immunology course, as I mentioned, like these would probably be offered by your university or even an outside course, seminars that you could be involved in.
Yeah, doing courses and reading newspaper articles as well as listening to seminars all sound like very good ways to prepare. Sarah, do you have any other ways?
Yeah, I like what Victoria said. And for me, it was kind of different because I wish I could have taken courses before my research started that was related to my research. But since I started so early on in my university degree, I had just done the basic general chemistry, physics, bio courses in a first year degree. So thing is, I didn't really have much of that background knowledge going into the position. So that did make it harder for me to get accustomed to the level of the project and understand what we were doing with the cancer biology on this level. So on my first day of work, one of the PhD students gave me this ginormous paper just on cancer biology, like just generally understanding everything about it, the hallmarks of cancer, stuff that I never had learned about before and stuff that I should know, just for like even just a general idea of what cancer is before we could even get into the details of the project. And that did help me. But after going through my second year, I realized that I learned so much this year that would have helped me going into my research position. And so much stuff fell into place this year. And I was like, oh, that's what that meant. Like I always thought I knew what I was talking about, but I didn't really. So I would say preparing as much as you can, especially if you're starting off early, would be nice. But honestly, the people who work in the labs are always so friendly and they're so nice and they're willing to explain anything to you. At least that's how it was for me. So even though I wasn't as experienced going in as I would have liked to be, I learned so much that summer just through what the PhD students were teaching me and all the questions that I asked to like PI. And through that, it actually kind of helped my classes this year because I felt like I had such a good background on the cancer biology and it helped me a lot with that course. But doing as much pre-research as possible is the best thing. I'm sure that everyone going into research with the lab is already reading all the papers of the lab, but if you're not, that's definitely something you should do just to know what they're doing so you're not going in on the first day like not knowing what's happening in the lab that you're going to be working in. But also just general stuff related to your field. So if you're doing neuroscience research, maybe just reading the most general old neuroscience papers you can find just to give you like an idea of what goes on in the kind of field that you're doing would be nice. And I'm sure that if you're struggling once you've started and you feel like you're kind of not getting what you need to get, there'll probably be people in the lab who can give you papers or content to read that'll help you get to where you need to be understanding the project that you're doing.
Yeah, and I think it is very important to get that preliminary understanding of what you're going into. So whether that be through doing courses or reading research papers, those all sound like great ideas. And I'll pass the next question back to Victoria.
Yeah, so this will be the final question. And I like to just end off by asking, when starting out a new project, it is common for a large set of criteria to sort of overwhelm our research progress. Like we look at a sheet of paper and there are just so many things that are jumping out at us. So what is some advice as to find a good place to start a research project? And for this, let's start off with Vitoria.
I feel like the best place to start with a project is a good question, like having an observation you either made through a paper or you found an interesting lecture and you have this really interesting question about it. The start of a research project is a little bit less concrete as actually pursuing it, but I would say having a good like something you're curious about, and then you go into literature, you find out more about it, and then you start finding solutions to this answer. But there are a lot of things that are still unknown in that field, for example. Then that's where your research project will come in. You'll work to address this question in ways that haven't been previously addressed before. So I definitely think the question is kind of the start, the first step in finding and starting a new research project. But definitely, once you have that kind of set, everything that comes after is just a lot of hard work. Like, definitely not easy, but once you have a really good question, then you know for sure that anything you're doing will help you answer that, even if experiments don't work, or even if your results are the opposite of what you're expecting, you're getting answers. Yeah, so I think that's definitely the best first step, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed that you mentioned something like on finding something you're curious about to start a research project. And I suppose this also ties us back to finding a project we're passionate about and want to learn more about. So I think that's pretty interesting. Let's go on to Megan.
Yeah, so I think when coming up with potential areas of research to participate in, I think it's a really good idea sometimes to draw upon your own personal background, because when you're explaining why you want to do this type of research, if you have a personal connection to it, it is very compelling, I think, both for you and the lab. And I think when it comes to actually finding research opportunities, I think one common way is just by looking at the different areas that your school or university has, and then really just going through all the faculty profiles one by one to see what their research interests are. And if you find some that you think are cool, you can look up their publications online and take a look at it. And then if you think that it's a suitable place for you to volunteer at, you can always shoot them an email. And yeah, we'll get into that in a future episode. But yeah, these are some common ways to find research opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. And I definitely think that personal connection is a very interesting and easy, I guess, way to find a good place to start a larger project. And finally, let's go on to Sarah.
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of harder because my first year things went kind of slow in the lab and I didn't have my own project. A lot of it was just helping out the PhD students and my PI with stuff that they were already doing. And I think that was a good way for me to start just because it helped me understand how someone who's at a higher level would do a project. And then it sort of made me understand what I could do in a 4 month frame for a project of my own. And a lot of the time, if you already have a lab, I think your instructor will help you a lot with sort of developing that idea and letting you know what the lab is able to do or what the direction they want to go in. And then they'll give you sort of like a subset of that idea for you to handle by yourself. And that's at least how it was for me. So what I basically did all summer, apart from my wet lab stuff where I helped the lab out and did sub projects for them that were kind of less formal, was I spent a lot of my time researching this one potential project that my PI was very interested in. And he was unsure about how much, background there was on this project or how much support we would have for the idea. So a lot of my time, I just spent hours reading papers, literally any papers on this one topic, trying to find as much evidence as possible, presenting at lab meetings every week on what new findings I had discovered based on my readings for the past week, and really trying to build up a background for this project so that this year when I'm starting, I have a lot of background on that topic. And now I feel like I've got enough evidence to really take the cells and do what we were planning on doing. So I know it sounds like it's a long process, but at least for me, it worked out really well because now I feel like I'm ready to start as soon as the summer starts, and then that's going to give me enough time to really see this project through properly, rather than trying to study something like really quickly at the beginning and then actually do it by the end. So I really like the fact that I had so much time to work on it, and I even worked on it during the school year, just developing the idea, making sure that grants are in place and the cells are ready, so that once I start next week, I can really have like a project that's going to be as in depth as I want it to be and ready to present by the end of the summer. But yeah, it can seem very overwhelming. But I do think one key thing is that a lot of support is given to you by the lab because you are the youngest one there when you're starting off. You know, you're the undergrad. There'll be master's kids and PhD kids and your PI, and they've been doing this for years. So they know a lot more and they're really able to help you and support you. And a lot of the time, they won't give you more than they know you can do. They try to ease you into it. So I think that if you are feeling overwhelmed once you're in a project, you could definitely communicate that to the members of your lab. But I doubt you would feel that way just because there is a lot of support there for you. And a lot of the time we underestimate what we can do. But once you get started on things, you'll get into a groove and it should be totally fine.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I definitely think that making the necessary preparations is important to ensure like a smooth research journey in the long run. And that concludes this week's OMS Podcast episode. We hope you enjoyed tuning in and learned something new. We would like to say a huge thank you to Victoria, Sarah, and Megan for being here with us.
To learn more information about Operation Med School, go check out our website at operationmedschool.com and our Instagram at Operation Med School. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time.